Jimmy Rogers has done a very good job of filling a lot of the holes that Matt Campbell's departure left behind, but he's not done yet. And if he doesn't focus on a few key positions, Iowa State is going to be in for a world of hurt next season.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, now the #1 sports podcast network, thanks to you. I am your host, Nick Marovets. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Be sure to hit subscribe down below so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Today, we're starting off talking about Jimmy Rogers and the class he's brought in. Where are the holes? We have talked a ton about all of the exciting guys that are coming in, what I'm super pumped about for next season, but we can't exactly ignore the fact that Jimmy Rogers is not done. And where does he need to look before this transfer class is completely finished? We'll talk about that first. Then in the second segment, we're going to take a look at why Jimmy Rogers has a legit shot this next season, specifically with a whole new roster. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about the Big 12, but Jimmy Rogers is the guy to get it done for Iowa State next season, and I am confident in that opinion. We'll talk about why in the second segment. Then to round out today's show, women's basketball has been through it over the last few games. Obviously, everybody felt the loss to Kansas on the men's side, but the women's basketball team that started so hot has not looked the same over the last 4 games. We're going to talk a little bit about that before we get out of here today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Iowa State's roster next season is going to look very, very different. I mean, that's not a shock to anybody who's paid any, even more than a cent of attention to this team, right? This team lost over 50 players and is working on getting some of those guys back. Obviously, head coach gone, assistant coaches all gone. It's going to be a totally new roster next season. That part is not surprising, but all we've done so far really is talk about the key positions, the key players that we're super excited about. And while I'm still excited about those, I wanted to take a second and kind of compare who left to who's coming in, and where does Iowa State and Jimmy Rogers specifically need to look first, or kind of as we get through the rest of this transfer portal. Transfer portal closes tomorrow. That doesn't mean you can't pick up guys after the portal closes. That's just the last time the players can actually enter. Let's start with an area. I'm going to go position by position here. So let's start with an area that we know Jimmy Rogers has covered. So no worries here. The offensive line is going to be just fine. We lost 8 offensive linemen by my count, and we brought in 10. So we are net +2 on the offensive lineman front. And I think we did bring in some legitimate weapons at offensive line. We'll circle back to a few of the key guys in just a second, but we're going to focus more today on the positions that I think need some targeting and why. So offensive line, ding, we're totally good there. Let's move on to the defensive line. This is an area, while we talk all the time about the offensive line and Jimmy Rogers, kind of walking the walk there because 10 offensive linemen are coming in, we haven't talked about the defensive line. By my count, 9 defensive linemen coming into the 4 that we lost to the portal. Of course, now keep in mind, I am comparing strictly to the portal here, losing guys to graduation. Like Big Citrus is not a part of this metric. So the net on the defensive line, honestly, across all of these just doesn't include guys going to the draft, guys graduating, whatever. I probably should have put those in here, but I'm going just based completely on the transfer portal for today. The defensive line, we're net +5 there. Look, the way I see that is just mostly that there is an emphasis on the lines. The 2 lines, offense and defense, are 1 and tied for 2 as far as number of incoming transfers. And obviously, Iowa State's basically forced to build their entire roster through the transfer portal. So that's where Jimmy Rogers is putting all of his attention right now. Both are net positive. That is good to see. We like that. We've talked about that before. Let's keep it moving. Defensive backs. Okay. This is an area where Jimmy Rogers probably does need to put some more focus over the next few days and weeks. By my count at time of recording, just keep in mind, things are changing all the time. Bringing in 9 defensive backs, safeties and corners to the 14 that are leaving. The secondary is an area where I think it's going to be coached very, very strongly with Ross Watson. I am not too worried about, even if we just get in, some guys that aren't on everybody's radar, I have a lot of faith in the coaching. and the systems that are going to be put in place to keep those guys, in or put them in the right spots, give them the best chance of making plays, those kinds of things. But you need bodies too. And as much as we've talked about like the linebackers and secondaries over the last 2 years, like from an injury standpoint, yes. But what I was getting at is towards the second half of the season this year, when Iowa State didn't have any secondary players, and John Haycock brought up the point, like, yeah, there aren't as many talented players out there, but at the same time, those guys that are out there are forced to play more snaps. And so the deeper, the more, more guys you can get into the room, the less actual snaps these top tier guys have to play. Or even if you go just to the second tier, like the top tier has a set number, but then the second and third tiers can kind of split the rest of the snaps, keep guys fresh. That was a big thing. I believe it was in the Texans game. Maybe it was the Texans game. I can't remember when it was. The Texans Steelers, when the Steelers were subbing out, or no, it was the Patriots and the Chargers, I think it was, when they were subbing out wide receivers and the defensive line had an opportunity to come in and get fresh legs. Either way, the concept is what I'm trying to get at here. When you get fresh legs in, they can cause more havoc. And that's what Iowa State can do if they can get some more defensive backs in. It's tough to run with those wide receivers up and down the field constantly. A defensive back was by far my least favorite position to play. Not because I wasn't any good. It had absolutely nothing to do with that. Of course, right? Trust me. But the real reason was there's so much running. And half the time wide receivers are running go routes just as clear out routes. They have nothing to do with the play. But as a defensive back, you don't know that's the point of the defense, is you are reacting. And so you're putting full effort into a route that is literally like, if the only way the ball would get thrown is if you didn't put in the effort. And so they get tired out really quickly. I'd love to see a few more numbers there. Another position that I want to see a little bit more emphasis, the wide receiver, literally the other side of the ball. By my count, 5 coming in to the 10 that were leaving. Look, Iowa State lost a lot of wide receivers. That was shocking to me. You got to have somebody to throw the ball to. We talked about Jalen Raynor and how he could run. Zane Flores, I think, is a very talented runner, but probably going to be a solid passer as well. But who is he going to pass it to? A few names that I am very excited about. We have talked about that, but as a whole, I want to see more wide receivers, right? You just can't run a roster with like 2 or 3 wide receivers and make them run the entire game. Just not going to work. Kind of the same reasons as the defensive back situation. Tight ends, we are net -2 by my count. Transfer portal only. Just a quick clarification there. I think that, if you don't plan on using tight ends very much, this isn't the end of the world. You obviously still need some more tight ends, I think, than what he has. But this could be something where maybe, we're okay with being net negative. We don't have as many tight ends on roster because we're not running as many 12, 13 personnel down sets. Maybe getting into that 14 personnel. Like Iowa State ran a lot of heavy tight end sets last year. And maybe that's just not the case for Jimmy Rogers' tenure. Maybe he just doesn't want to put as much emphasis on those tight ends. Whether or not you agree with that philosophy is totally different than what the actual number of tight ends needed for the offense he wants to run is. So the tight ends, I'm not too bent out of shape about. Linebackers, however, there is a pretty large disparity there. I would like to see more emphasis on the linebackers moving forward. By my count, 3 in to 9 out, so net -6 just in the transfer portal alone. And we lost a lot of talent at the linebacker position. So I don't know if that's one of those positions where just getting a ton of guys in is going to be good to see how they gel with the defensive line. Who's going to be like an effort guy versus who is, obviously there's extremely talented linebackers out there that can just read the defense or are extremely prepared at all times or whatever. I think it would be a good plan to have a fair amount of linebackers in the room. And then the last 3 positions here, quarterback, running backs, and just general special teams players. Look, special teams, it's fine. I trust him on that one. Running back, though, is one that I think needs a little bit more focus. Quarterback, I'm cool with that. But really for me, the main positions that I want to see more emphasis on over the next few days or potentially weeks, I want to see some more defensive backs. I want to see some more wide receivers. I want to see linebackers, and I want to see at least one more running back. I know that we've got some running backs on roster right now and a few coming in. Bowling Green the Bowling Green player, I can't remember off the top of my head, is going to be a big one that I'm super excited about, MAC freshman of the year. But I think we could probably manage bringing in one more running back. I Just my opinion. That one I'm not as bent out of shape about, but wide receivers, defensive backs, and linebackers, I think, have to be the main focus for Jimmy Rodgers moving forward. However, even what he has, honestly, is totally valid. I just want to throw that out there. He does have a very solid roster built. My total count, he's got 45 guys coming into the 57 that Iowa State lost. If that 57 number is right, first off, that's ridiculous. And if that updates or changes, at this point, it should be pretty much set in stone. The portal will close tomorrow. But there's also a ton of different websites out there. That's the number that I have. And 45 incoming is very, very close to that. Iowa State's going to be just fine. Jimmy Rodgers, I think, is going to do a great job. And why specifically he's going to do a great job, I'll talk about coming up right here after this. But first, a word from our friends over at Game Time. There's nothing like college football season. Tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever. But actually getting tickets, that part used to be frustrating with long queues, logins, prices jumping at checkout. But that's why Game Time gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. By far my favorite feature of all time is the fact that I can see the view from my seat before I actually purchase. All right. I don't really understand the maps thing. The depth perception is really challenging to me. This gives me the opportunity to see exactly what my view will be before I purchase it. I know exactly what I'm getting into. The zone deals are also a great feature. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save even more. I mean, they do kind of all the work there. So the fact that I know the prices all up front, including fees, really makes the whole process stress-free and takes the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. All right, we got to break down why Jimmy Rodgers is the man for the job and what specifically about him and his experience is going to lead to Iowa State having a successful year next season. But first, I just want to thank you for making Locked On Cyclones your first watch or listen of the day, for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Could not do this without you. If you haven't already, go check out the new Everydayer Club. Gets you access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Cyclones. Wherever you listen to your podcast, also gets you access to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server. You can go check out the link in the show notes below or on the description below if you're watching on YouTube. Shout out to every single one of you guys making this your first watch or listen. I appreciate it more than you know. Let's go ahead and jump into why Jimmy Rodgers is the man for the job. This was actually kind of a genius hire by Jamie Pollard, and I know that he's going to get a lot of heat for this. This hire, just because this is a very tough hire to make. It was made in the snap of a finger. I didn't even fully understand or believe that Matt Campbell was gone before we already knew who our next head coach was. So it was extremely quick, and it wasn't a name that I think a lot of people had on their radar. Some did, for sure, but I don't think everybody was ready for it. And so Jamie Pollard is certainly under the microscope here, especially coming off of a 10-year career. But in some ways, for Matt Campbell, I mean, in some ways, this was the perfect hire because Jimmy Rodgers has done what he is going to have to do now before. I think, I don't know if this went into the kind of thought process for Jamie Pollard, but let's give him the benefit of the doubt and play this out for a second. I wonder if Jamie Pollard understood that if Matt Campbell is leaving Iowa State for a bigger university in college football, not retiring or going to the NFL, he's going to pull a lot of players with him, right? If Matt Campbell goes and coaches, the New York Giants, which I know it's Harbaugh now, but let's just say, for example, it ends up being Matt Campbell because that timeline, you can't take Rocco with you, right? Other than pulling him into the draft. You can't take some of these freshmen with you, which did end up going over to Penn State. They just literally can't yet. It takes time. Versus going over or even retiring. Like, nobody's going to follow you into retirement. That doesn't make any sense. Going over to a different college team, and notably a bigger college team in the Big Ten, you're going to pull players with you. And you're going to be left with kind of a shell of your roster if you're Jamie Pollard and Iowa State. What do you do in that situation? You hire a coach who has done almost the impossible before. by bringing in over 70 new players to Washington State and taking them to a bowl game last year. That's impressive. And that's why I do believe that Iowa State has a not more than a reasonable shot at a very successful year this upcoming season. Yesterday, we talked about specifically why I thought Iowa State versus the rest of the Big 12, we had a really good shot. And super quick synopsis, the entire Big 12 is in a crazy era of turnover. The entire Big 12 is, shaking up here, shaking up there, coaches, quarterbacks, coordinators everywhere. It's chaos. And Iowa State's schedule is honestly pretty favorable without looking at, week by week and where the buys are and all of that. Whoever we got home, whoever we got away, I guess the only argument would be that Iowa State plays a lot of weak teams at home. And I guess if you could, I do like playing the weak teams at home, honestly. I think that there's something to be said there where you don't accidentally drop a weak game. So I predicted, 7 wins is very doable. 8 wins is also very doable for Iowa State. But some of the comments I saw you guys like, hey, 6 wins would be a great year. And I do agree with that. Like I am not setting the expectations at an 8-4 season. I'm not setting the expectations at like a 10-win season. I'm not getting out of control here, but I do want to just swing your way the concept that Jimmy Rogers has done this before. He's brought in a whole new team and taken them to a bowl game. Washington State to a bowl game. And nothing against Washington State, but it's just not Iowa State, right? And I think that you can kind of notice that in the amount of Washington State players that ended up transferring over to Iowa State. You're going to bring some with you. You absolutely are. As a head coach, there are going to be guys that just want to play for you, right? That part I'm not arguing. But the raw number of Washington State players that came over, if you have a relationship with the new head coach at a Power 4 Big 12 team, that's an opportunity that at the very least you should probably entertain, and a lot of players did. I think that there's a world where Iowa State is just a bigger program, and I'm not trying to be rude to Washington State here. I just think we have to accept the reality of the situation that Iowa State has some more talent, obviously facing more talented teams, but has a little bit of a capability to bring in more talent. And with that roster, then more likelihood of winning, and a roster that, Jimmy Rogers kind of pieced together, was able to become a bowl game or a bowl team last year with Washington State, 6 wins. Why can't he do that again this year? I can't think of a single reason, especially when you look at the actual transfer list. I mean, it's incredible. It really is. And then the hires that he's making at the coaching level as well, I am super excited about. So, we've dove into, and we will continue to dive into player by player, position by position, coach by coach, but just looking at the big picture here, you put the whole puzzle together. For the most part, there's a few pieces missing, but once you've got, 50 pieces left of a 1,000-piece puzzle, it's starting to make a lot of sense. You can kind of piece the whole thing together with just even those little gaps. The whole picture looks really good right now. And who's putting the puzzle together? Jimmy Rogers. He's done this before. He's put a puzzle together straight out of the box, and potentially you could argue with no picture. Have you ever had to put a puzzle together without the box? You like prop it up on the side and you're like, okay, what does that look like? What does that look like? Well, in some respects, Jimmy Rogers is doing it without the box. He got all the puzzle pieces in a clear Ziploc bag, and he had to somehow find a way to put everything together. And for Washington State, he was able to do it to the point where a 6-6 season, that's a very successful season. I don't know if I can continue the puzzle analogy there. I don't know what that would be. Maybe you got the outline done. I don't know exactly what that would be, but definitely my favorite part of a puzzle. But for an Iowa State team, I feel like he's got some of the box set up. He knows kind of now what he has to do to develop a winning team right off the bat. And I think we're seeing that in what the transfer portal looks like. I think we're seeing that in the coaching hires, and I trust Jimmy Rogers. Look, I'm not saying that he's going to win 8 games this season. Okay, I'm not guaranteeing that. But I do think that he has done a very good job of building the team so far, and he's done it in the past. We should absolutely consider him as a legitimate, program rebuilder. I think that there's a lot of trust there. All right, we're going to go ahead and pivot over to college basketball, not the men's side after their loss to Kansas. No, the women's side after 4 straight losses. What is going on in women's basketball? We'll talk about it coming up right here after this. Audie Crooks kind of became a national phenomenon overnight. And Iowa State basketball with her. And the start to the season for Iowa State women's basketball was electric, to say the least. And we're going to talk about it here at Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, now the number one sports podcast network. But the start to the season, 14-0, ranked number 10, was so sweet. Lately, it has not been quite the same. 0-4 through the last 4. Currently ranked 19th. I don't know if that will continue after the loss to Colorado this, just a few days ago. This has been ugly. I am not going to lie to you. We'll kind of walk through what's happened here and what exactly I think the culprit is, maybe what needs to happen moving forward. We're going to fire through this one, so stick with me here. Like I said, Iowa State starts 14-0 and in conference play beat Kansas and beat Houston before losing to Baylor 72-70, Cincinnati 71-63, West Virginia 83-80, and Colorado 68-62. It is important to note that Ariana Jackson and Addie Brown are out for what looks like the foreseeable future. Both of them logged minutes against Baylor. Ariana Jackson was 7 points on 35 minutes. Addie Brown on 2 points on 30 minutes against Cincinnati. Ariana Jackson had 6 points on 34 minutes. And that would have been the first game without Addie Brown. Excuse me. And then against West Virginia, we did not get an Ariana Jackson there. So we have been without the two major starters over the last 2 and missing one of the 2 over the last 3. Worth noting there. So this team is struggling to kind of find who they are offensively right now. This team is absolutely a different team than it was just even 5 games ago. And when that much shakeup happens that quickly and you start to lose games, it can feel like things are getting out of control at a rapid rate. Looking at the Colorado game, the most recent game for Iowa State, they scored 62 points, not a ton of points, and it was Sydney Harris and Audie Crooks, basically. 16 from Sydney Harris, 17 from Audie Crooks, and then 9 from Jada Williams and 7 from Kenzie Hare. As far as starters go, Reese Beatty added 8 off the bench. The problem with this women's team right now is that they can become very one-dimensional. They still have a few pieces, but the biggest thing is, like I said, they're struggling to find their identity. When you go from having Addie Brown and Audie Crooks and Ariana Jackson and Jada Williams and Sydney Harris and like you have all these pieces and everyone has their defined roles. It's kind of what I talked about with the men's side a little bit. I have talked about it to an extent, is once you have those defined roles, you can find a lot of success because you understand, obviously everyone's giving full effort all the time, but nobody's really stepping outside their lane. No one's playing hero ball. To take it back to kind of a Patriots, mentality, I'm a Patriots fan, do your job, right? You don't do somebody else's job. It wouldn't make sense for the quarterback who's supposed to be throwing the ball to be blocking. For who would they be blocking for? They hand it off to the running back? And obviously it's on a down-by-down basis. What is your job this play? I get that. But from basketball's perspective, what is Milan's job? Shoot a bunch of times, right? Score a bunch of points. His job is not necessarily, obviously getting rebounds is good, but his job is not necessarily to be dominant in the paint, really boxing guys out, bringing down 15 rebounds a game. It's not really his job. He handles his thing, and Joshua Jefferson handles his thing. All right, we got everyone doing their thing. If everyone's working on their portion of the puzzle, the entire picture gets put together. If we're going to stick with that puzzle analogy, when you start to lose players to injury and now position kind of becomes foggy, what is your actual not only identity but role on the team? Do you have to take over for kind of what we were getting from this player or that player? It becomes a little bit just kind of messy, and then you're losing on top of all of that. I'm not going to make a crazy prediction here over the next Oklahoma State, Cincinnati at home, Arizona at home, Texas Tech on the road, 4 games. But I wouldn't say that the outlook is super good right now. If you're Iowa State, if you're this women's team, you have to band together and just kind of, I don't know, like you got to play for each other. You've got to find a reason, I think, is probably step one. And then I think the rules will kind of define themselves as you play for each other. You play selfless ball movement, just basic fundamentals of basketball. I think that's the best kind of play here. I'm obviously no coach. I'm not the one out there every single night, but they're going through a really tough time right now, just with missing key players. And then as a result of that, losing games, and then you're losing games and you don't have the same team. So you don't really know exactly what's going on. It's a tough scene. It really is. The season is not over. Okay. You're 14-4 on the year. It's kind of the same thing with the men, right? 16-1 on the year. It feels like the sky's falling after a loss to Kansas, but it's not technically over yet. There's still a lot of season left. I mean, this Iowa State team could rip off wins, hypothetically speaking, because the games haven't happened yet. Let's say they beat Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, Arizona, Texas Tech, UCF, Utah, BYU, Kansas State, Arizona State, TCU, Oklahoma State, Kansas State. That's an extra, I don't know how to count on my fingers, roughly 12 games, 11 games. I'm not even going to bother recounting, but let's say at least 10 games. And then they're 24-4, 25-4, 26-4. Yeah, that's a pretty good season. So it's not over yet, right? It's not the end of the world that they lost these 4 games in a row. I mean, look at what the football side did. Finished the season strong after 4 straight losses, found a way to beat TCU and finish the year with a very respectable record, with a win in a bowl game. They would have made a 9-win season out of a 4-loss skid. It was ugly. I mean, we all remember it like it was yesterday. A little bit too much memory for me. So this isn't the end, right? Audie Crooks probably has to step up and score more than 17 points, but it can't be one-dimensional. And the argument right now is that everybody in the Big 12 has found the key to beating Iowa State. They have the tape. Once you find, what it is that makes Iowa State tick and shut that down, Iowa State doesn't have a chance. I would argue that is not the case. I would argue that they're just struggling internally. And if you can, kind of redefine the roles and come out and play for each other and all of those kinds of things, you can find a way to get back on track, right? I don't think, obviously, the tape situation, that's basketball every single year, right? Like, this is not anything new to Bill Fennelly. I wouldn't say he's shocked now that, like, Colorado was able to watch a few Iowa State games. Like, no, he knew that that's going to happen. That's why we talk about, against Norfolk State, is Iowa State running the same sets they're going to be running in the middle of Big 12 play? Probably not, because they don't want people to get wind of what they're trying to do earlier than they want them to. Like, you don't want them to find out ever what you're really doing, I guess, unless you're TJ Outsberger and he's like, we will give them the tape gladly. They got to beat us, which is I can respect that, kind of viewpoint as well. So, look, I think, my overall take on this is a very tough skid. 4 straight losses, of course, players missing. What are the roles? Like, kind of feels like the sky is falling down. It's not. It's just 4 games. I know losses hurt. Back-to-back hurts. Back-to-back hurts. I understand that. It's not fun. Practices right now, probably not super fun, laughy, joyful. I get it. Probably not going to enjoy going into practice every day right now. That doesn't mean it's over, though. That does not mean that there is, no reason to play the rest of the season. It's like, okay, why are we even out? No, you still have a lot to play for here. Only 4 games. If you dropped 4 games the entire course of the season, right? Let's say hypothetically they lose to Baylor, first game, okay? They win the last 3, then they lose to Oklahoma State. That's their second loss. Then they rip off like another 4 or 5 in a row, and they lose to BYU. Then they rip off 2, 3 more wins. They lose to Oklahoma State. And then they beat Kansas. It's just a little streaky, couple of weird games in there, but you only lost 4 conference games on the year. Not bad. I wouldn't sit here and tell you, that's a failure of a season. So if you can get back on track, and then and the other side of this coin too, is if you can get back on track and win the rest of these conference games, which I know is a very tall task. Speaking of tall, like Texas Tech, right? Like, I'm not saying that this is likely, but I am saying if they can find a way to even win all of these games, but like 1 or 2 or 3 games, if they could just get themselves right back on track here and have a very commendable ending to the season, momentum will be on their side. Sounds like maybe Ariana Jackson could come back potentially. Addie Brown, not quite as certain on that. But as you get these players back and you start to get some momentum going into the postseason, that's where you want to be. Our season is not over yet. It's been ugly. It has not gone over the last 4 games the way we thought it was going to go, but it's not over. Just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments or on Twitter at Nick_Marv. I appreciate every single one of you guys for making this your first watch or listen of the day. You guys are the real ones. Could not do this without you. That being said, until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.